Hello and welcome to the first part of today's webinar. My name is Hayleigh Sheen and I'll be leading you through just a very short 10-minute introduction all about the promotion of scientific research using different social networks. Before we begin though, I'd like you to just picture the scene that after weeks and weeks of drafting a manuscript for publication, going back and forth between your supervisors, your collaborators, but then also following peer review with the journal editor, you finally received that brilliant email that says, "Congratulations, your manuscript has been accepted for publication." Now this is a great feeling. All of that hard work has finally paid off and your work is going to be published and available for people to read. But what happens now? Do we sit back and wait for people to access our publication, or is there something else that we can do to really highlight the work that we've done and essentially enhance the visibility of our findings? So there is increasing emphasis on the requirement for research to have impact. There are many different ways of defining impact and measuring it, but essentially speaking, we're thinking about how our research can move beyond simply people just understanding or knowing about what we've done to actually provoke a change, be that in terms of attitudes or behaviours, but also clinical practice and policy. But one of the key ways that we can maximise the impact of our research is to enhance the visibility of it, to ensure that the research is read by people for whom it's intended for, but also it's actually accessing those populations who are most likely to be able to provoke that change. And so publication alone is quite limited in enhancing visibility. It's definitely necessary in terms of having something for people to read, but it's actually not that sufficient in terms of maximising the visibility, because you are inherently reliant on people going into that journal and finding your publication. It's also the fact that many non-academics don't read academic journals, and so it may be that the audience who you really want to read your work is unlikely to actually access it merely in its publication form. And there are also financial implications of publishing our research in terms of paywalls or subscriptions that are required, and often people outside of academia won't have access to journals. And then there's the time requirement of sitting down and reading a paper from start to finish that may also place an additional burden on people and may make them not want to read it. And so when we're thinking about how we can promote our research, we need to think about how we can make our findings visible for a wide range of people and the people who we really want to read our work, but also how we can enhance accessibility to our findings. And so how might we do this? Well, there are a number of different ways that people can promote their research. Some academics have their own personal websites or blogs, but these can be quite costly in terms of time required to set it up, but also time required to maintain it. There are also different platforms such as academia, ResearchGate and LinkedIn that are widely used by academics, as you can see by those statistics on the board there. But what we're going to be thinking about in particular today is social networking, and specifically we're going to be thinking about the utility of Twitter as a platform that can help us to really promote our research and to do so in an effective way. So why am I focusing specifically on Twitter? Well, one of the really superior things about Twitter is the potential breadth of reach. You can reach people from a number of different professional backgrounds and a number of different locations. And as demonstrated by the paper that I've cited on the board there, and with the table in front of you too, even Twitter accounts with a very modest following can still have a wide range of reach, and to help you to tap into and to access those populations who you really want to read the findings that you've produced. And so in this example here, for a Nursing Rounds Twitter account that had 46 followers at that point in time, some may say that that's a relatively modest amount of followers, but once you take into account the followers of those followers, your potential reach there is over nearly 150,000 people. And as well, you can see the breakdown of different professional backgrounds there, that the different types of people that you're actually accessing with your Twitter account can introduce that diversity that can be really valuable. Another important feature of Twitter is the speed of dissemination, and this is largely due to the accessibility of it. Studies indicate that most people access Twitter through their mobile phone, and so by using your Twitter account to promote your research, you can be essentially putting your findings right there into the palm of the people who may be interested in reading it. And there's an additional benefit as well to using Twitter, with some studies indicating that the more a study was tweeted about in its early days since publication, the more citations that study then went on to produce or to achieve. And so this is another metric of impact, because it's indicative that people are actually reading the work that you've published. So what can we really do then? Whenever we're thinking about promoting our research findings using Twitter, we need to think about, first of all, our profile, we need to think about our tweets, and we need to think about how we can build our online network. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time just briefly going over the basics of each of those elements, so that for those of you watching who are perhaps new to using Twitter, you may feel a little bit more confident about starting out on doing this. So, first things first, we need to think about our Twitter profile, because this is essentially almost like a real-life business card. So when you're setting up your profile, you need to think first and foremost about having a simple and recognisable handle. And so you can see with the example here where I put the Shrip account up on the slide, the handle that we've chosen to go with is just at the Shrip. And so it's really easy to remember and really easy to find us if people search for us on Twitter. You also want to use a recognisable photograph, a profile photograph. So you can see we've used our society logo as our photograph to again enhance the identifiability of the account. And there are a number of different things that we can also think about in terms of our biography. And so I've put on two really good examples here from Sergio and Kira, who are using their biography to effectively highlight who they are, what they particularly do, and any specific interests that they may have. You can see that Sergio, in the top right-hand side there, has tagged his location of work to highlight the fact that he works for those bodies. We've also seen that Kira has used hashtags to again expand upon her reach and also highlight the research interests that she has. And so these are really good hints and tricks that we can use. There is also an option on your Twitter profile to include a website. And so you can see Sergio there has included his ResearchGate profile. And that's a really good way of enabling people who come across his profile to find out further information about the work that he produces. Something else you can think about as well is pinning a tweet at the top of your profile. And so sometimes people may pin a tweet of a specific paper or an achievement that they had. And this means that whenever somebody goes onto their profile, they can spot that pinned tweet and find out a little bit more about that person. You can also see on the Shrip account, I've pinned the tweet about our upcoming call for funding, just to highlight the fact that that's what we're really looking at this point in time. The next thing to think about is how to effectively tweet. And now tweeting is essentially an art of brevity. You have 260 characters to get your point across as effectively as you possibly can. And so what you say has to be brief and it has to emphasise really key information. But what makes an effective tweet? I'm going to use a little bit of comparison here. We're going to first think about a tweet that I put out on my account highlighting a new paper that I had published. Now, some may say that this is definitely short, it's straight to the point, and I suppose it's emphasising key information. But are you likely to click on that link that I've tweeted out on my account? It's unlikely that you are, and in fact, when I looked at the user statistics of this tweet, nobody clicked on the link, which is not surprising really, because there's not really much other information that I've included. So what can I do to really improve on this? Well, we're going to use an example here from Shan, my wonderful PhD student, who has really effectively tweeted about a new paper that she'd published earlier on this year. And we can see here the different tricks that Shan is using to communicate her update, but also to do so in a really effective way. Shan has included the key information about her paper. We know kind of the topic that this paper's on. She's also tagged the journal that has published her paper and also tagged her collaborators. And this again expands the reach because you go directly onto the account of that other person. Shan has also included a link to her paper. So not only is she setting people up by telling them what her paper is about, she's giving them the means to go and find out more information. Now, if you're really struggling with the length of tweets, you can also use infographics and screenshots that can have a screenshot of text to expand upon what you want to say. And again, using hashtags in your tweets can widen your reach because when people search for a hashtag, they'll come up with your tweet, even if they're not following you. And so the final thing to think about is how you can build your online network. Well, hopefully it goes without saying, the key thing here is to follow those with similar interests. So follow other researchers, other academics who really inspire you or conduct research along a similar line to yours, and then look through their followers as well to identify other accounts that you may be interested in networking with. The other thing to think about is to tweet regularly about your interests, but to do so in a way that's not only just tweeting about any achievements you've had, but to also expand and to share the other relevant research and achievements of other academics too. You can also use questions to generate a discussion, as we can see with this example on the slide there. When I attended a keynote lecture at the SHRIP conference earlier on this year, one of the key questions from that I included in a tweet to expand the discussion beyond the realms of the conference itself and to see what other people on Twitter really thought about it. Conferences are in general a really good way of highlighting your interests, and often you'll see that conferences have a hashtag to follow. And so by using that hashtag, you can then link your tweets to all those that are taking place about that conference, and you highlight yourself as not only a researcher with these interests, but you can also identify other people with shared interests with yours too. And finally, you can also engage in online chats. And now I haven't provided too many specific examples here because I'm aware that our particular interests may vary. However, as an early career researcher, you may wish to look at hashtags such as academic chatter or PhD chat to enable you to connect with other early career researchers too. But the other thing to think about is that Twitter is quick. So make sure you time your tweets to align with the times that people are most likely to be using the platform. And generally speaking, something that I've often found in my practice is that often people are using Twitter before, during and after their commute. And so if you time your tweet to around early in the morning or perhaps even early evening, you often receive a lot more engagement because that's when people are sat scrolling on their phone. So this brings us to the end of our webinar today. Hopefully this has been a useful introduction to how you may promote your research using different social networks. And we've covered a couple of really important hints and tips around how you can set up your profile, how you can tweet effectively and engagingly, but also how you can begin to build your online network. But above all, I hope you enjoy the journey into using Twitter and that you use it to effectively promote the important research that you're working on.